And we are recording. That's my unofficial intro for the YouTube viewers. Just my first words are always, and we are recording. The podcast listeners have their own intro. But Marcel, thanks for being on.
My pleasure, Aaron.
Welcome to the Honey Badger Diaries. We've never met. I don't think we've ever met, right?
No, I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. I'm not in Brazil very often. I've never been in Brazil. Maybe I think a lot of my listeners might not know who you are. So let's start with who are you? Please introduce yourself.
Okay, Aaron. First of all, thanks for having me. My name is Marcel. I am Brazilian. I worked in the financial industry, equities, sales and trading for almost 20 years. So I worked at UBS, Deutsche Bank, UBS, Pactual, Safra. So I have a background of, I'm not an economist. I'm a trader in sales. I have a graduation in BA, Business Administration. So I joined Bitcoin in 2017, mostly because of my brother, who also lives in Netherlands.
Oh, really?
He's Brazilian, but he lives in Europe has been living there for the past 10 years.
Do you know where he lives? Which city?
He lives in The Hague.
Right.
The Hague. He trades oil there. And he was telling me about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, and he was really excited and said, wow, there's amazing potential, and you also have a financial background, plus you used to work in IT, you used to be a coder, so that's a perfect fit for you. You should study that. And after some time, I gave in. I said, well, the thing was like $500 6 months ago. Now it's $1,000. So maybe let's have a look. Maybe it's worth the time.
So you said 2017, but it sounds like you didn't get in at the top. You were in time.
He started telling me in 2016, in fact. And I was all the time, no, if it doesn't have a central authority, it's not going to work. I don't think we should be spending time with it. So it took me at least 6 months just to have a look, the first look, and see what's happening here. So in 2017, I digged in and I went down the rabbit hole, and it led me to write for, just like you did, to CoinTelegraph. I'm an editorial writer there. I also write for Portal do Bitcoin, which is the major outlet here in Brazil. And I do some consulting work for exchanges as well here in Brazil.
Right. Yeah, I worked for CoinTelegraph back in, I think, 2014, 15 for a little while.
Yeah, I have read some of your material. Also on Bitcoin Magazine, of course.
Sure. And where are you in Brazil?
I'm located in Mato Grosso do Sul, which is like the Midwestern. It's like the Texas of Brazil. People here mostly raise cattle and grains and stuff. It's a large city for European and American measures. We have 900,000 inhabitants. But for Brazil, it's not even one of the top 10 cities.
Right. Okay. I usually start my podcast with a sort of recap of what's been going on in Brazil since the outbreak of the virus.
Sure.
I want to keep it short because for a lot of countries it's sort of similar, but let's start there. What has been happening in Brazil so far?
Okay, so I think during Carnival, which is a really huge holiday here in Brazil, most likely government already had an idea that something wrong was happening abroad, but they decided it would be more important for the economy because all the hotels were booked, all the cruises and stuff like this were coming to Brazil, and they said, well, just let it happen. So after the Carnival, which ended early March, government quickly changed the attitude and said, well, hey, we got to limit inbound in flights from China and Italy, where things are starting to get more serious, because they know that we have a public health system. It's basically free for everyone, but it really can't handle that much inflow. And even like 30 to 40% of the people who have spare money, they pay private insurance companies and private health. because they know that if they have a problem, they won't be able to count with the public insurance.
Yeah. Do
So,
you think a lot of people got infected during Carnival?
oh, definitely. Oh, definitely.
That's
For
interesting
sure.
because the same thing happens in the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, we have half the country celebrates Carnival and the other half doesn't. Sort of
Okay.
the south has Carnival, but it's very different from Brazilian Carnival.
I imagine.
It's just drunk people with silly suits. I don't go
Okay.
there. I'm from the north. I don't bother with any of that. But in the south, they do it. And now in the south, that's the big outbreak area of coronavirus. So it was definitely a lot of infections during Carnival.
Yeah, and another interesting thing that I should point out is that the first confirmed case were most of them were in São Paulo, which is the business center of Brazil, and all of them working in financial markets, because it's people who travel abroad a lot to New York, to Italy, to Spain, or to China to do business. So it's interesting to see that the spread in Brazil came from the rich people to the poor people, because
Right.
you have maids who work at your home, you have people who work in your building to clean the building and stuff like this. So the rich people transmitted the virus to poor people. Now it's even in the favelas, which are the slums where people live. And keep in mind that 50% of Brazilian population do not have access to sewage.
50, half the country doesn't have
Half of the country, yeah. I would say 20% of them live in urban, not big cities, rural countries. So maybe they would never have access to sewage. They have their own solutions. But there's like 30% of the population who lives in big cities, mid to large cities, and they don't have sewage. So
Right. That sounds shocking to me. That's way more than I thought. Like I said, I've never been to Brazil. I guess I'm not an expert on Brazil, but half of the country. Is your president? Do they call him the tropical Trump?
Yeah.
Is that what they call him?
Yeah, he has a mentality close to Trump. He believes he knows everything, so he's not even following the Minister of Health recommendation. He's even thinking about firing the guy during the crisis. But he also has a military background. So he always believes in his mind that the militaries can solve any kind of issue, even health issue. And the chloroquine medicine used in malaria, here in Brazil, the army produces this medicine, because there are always officials that are going to Amazon.
Yeah, you actually have the malaria problem, of course.
We have the malaria problem.
Right.
So he's pushing this agenda pro chloroquine. Doesn't matter what the health minister or research says. So he has he's like Trump in this sense.
Yeah. Okay. You think he's pushing that solution for economic reasons because it's produced in Brazil, or is that not what you're saying?
No, he just wants people to feel safe and go back to work. That's what he wants to do.
Right, I see. Yeah, I saw a clip on somewhere, a Dutch show, I think, where he was bragging that the coronavirus wouldn't affect him because he had such an athletic background.
Maybe he was like 20 to 30 years ago, but that's not the truth nowadays. Definitely not.
Or was he a football player?
No, he used to do the pentathlon in the army.
I thought all Brazilians, you only get your passport if you know how to play football, right?
Soccer, yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, and I think at first he had a...
We have another interesting characteristic about Brazil. I don't know about Netherlands, but here it's very usual for people to live like 8 to 10 people in the same house, in a small house, especially if you live in a poor region. So just telling people to stay at home, well, their grandparents, their kids, it's not going to work, because I don't know, maybe in the United States it's very usual for people to live alone by themselves, or a single couple with 1 or 2 kids. That's not what happened in Brazil. Like, I would say 50% of the population lives in house with 5 or more people from different generations. So is that a solution? I don't know.
Yeah, that sounds like it complicates things, doesn't it? Even home quarantine will be very tricky then. Yeah, if your kids go out, for sure. I think So I usually do like half an hour of research, to be honest. That's all I do for every podcast. But the other thing I found was at first the president had what do you call it, a slogan,
Denial.
well, the Brazil cannot stop
Mm-hmm.
sort of a campaign. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
But then they flip-flopped, and now they're taking it quite serious, I think.
Yeah, because some of the governors, like São Paulo governor, he said, well, that's crazy. I'm going to tell people I can make laws in my state and people are going to stay home because I listen to the doctors here and they're telling me that things are going to get pretty serious and we don't have ventilators. We don't have internal care beds for everyone. So it's not going to happen. And he even got a soccer stadium and made some changes in order to get patients there. I don't think it's still being used, but he made sure that the best that the state could provide is being done. And on the other hand, Bolsonaro is probably concerned about being reelected or his image, and he wants things to go back to normal. So my question is, are we gonna go ever back to normal?
Yeah, let's get to that in a bit. What is the current situation in Brazil, lockdown-wise? Is there a full lockdown, or what's the...
For example, in the city that I live in, Campo Grande, Mato Grosso do Sul, there's curfew time. By night, everybody has to be at home. And only some kind of shops can be open for business. Supermarkets, drugstores, restaurants and food stuff. But other than that, most of the retail shops are either closed or only working with deliveries.
Right. And is it working? What do you know what the status is in the hospitals or with cases? Or
we have 1,000 people dead already. The hospitals are not yet at full capacity, but lots of the doctors and nurses are already starting to get sick. So I have a friend who is a dermatologist. She works part-time for the government, and she was called to work in a regular hospital. Despite being a dermatologist, doesn't even know what this disease mean or how to treat it, but they say, well, you work for the government, you're a doctor, come here. Even if you are in the last year of university of medicine, you are being called out to help as well.
Anyone with at least 3 years of medical school is now called in, basically.
Yeah. So first, this sounds a desperate solution. This doesn't sound like they're, how can I say? Bolsonaro is sending like 20 planes in different times to China to get supplies. And they're afraid that United States are going to confiscate the items when they refill the tanks in Europe or Africa. So,
sorry, what?
Bolsonaro is sending some planes to China. Mm-hmm. He bought some ventilators and masks and stuff like this. And the government is afraid that the United States or Europe will seize the items when the plane refills the tank, because the plane can't make from China to Brazil in one flight. So it has to refill in either Africa or Europe, I don't know. And Bolsonaro is afraid that the other governments are going to steal our items.
Is that a legitimate concern? That sounds like...
Sure.
You think so? That sounds like warlike situation type of concern.
It's happening, man. It's happening. Some planes that were going to Canada were diverted to the U.S. This already happened in the world. It's not something specific for Brazil.
Really? I had not heard of that. That sounds insane.
In Brazil, for example, let's say a judge gave a ruling saying that workers on this federal building should have masks all the time. So he gives a mandate, I don't know how to say English, to the police. So the police can go to wherever factory or industry and seize the masks and give to the employers of this building. So now the doctors are appealing to the Supreme Court and saying, hey, you cannot do this. There are federal agents invading the hospital and stealing our masks to give to another kind of working business. I don't care what it is, but they cannot seize from the hospital or from our supplier. So it's crazy.
It is crazy. I've heard similar stories from the States as well. Yeah, that is so. That's happening in Brazil as well. That is absolutely nuts. All right, let's get to more of your specialty. I think let's get to the economic situation, and I'm just going to start with an open question. What do you see going on? Maybe
Well,
start wherever you want.
economics in Brazil have always been really dependent on government. We call it social democratic, whatever, but the government owns directly or indirectly like 40% of the companies here in Brazil, and about a third of the banks, either by a controlling stake or by a government bank.
That sounds like a lot. That's you're halfway to socialism.
Yeah, we're halfway to that. Yeah, government owns like 30 to 40% of all the assets, all the lands, all the buildings, all the companies. And it used to be worse. We had a dictatorial regime by the army not so long ago, like 60 years ago. And they were the one 60 years ago. 60. It was during the 60s here in Brazil, 1960s.
Right.
We have a dictatorship by the army. And most of Latin America, we had this.
Sure.
So during that time, they built lots of government-backed companies, like mining companies, like steel plants and hydrothermic. So basically, 80% of the energy in Brazil, it's mostly hydro and a little bit of coal, belongs to the government. Both the production of energy and electricity and the transmission, 80% of it. There has been some privatizations over the last 20 years or so, but it's still mostly owned by government. So I don't think there's a way out for us saying, well, government shouldn't intervene, let the market handle it itself, because at our current situation, it's not going to work. Because, like as I said, a lot of the large companies are heavily dependent on either special credit financing by government. We have a bank which is called Development Bank, BNDES, which basically selects some companies that they think they're relevant for the economy, and they're give them a credit line for 10 years or 20 years with an interest rate like 2% per year. Whereas a normal Brazilian company would pay like 8% per year for the same amount, and probably not a 10-year or 20-year extension. So we live in a, as you said, partially socialist country. We have a program that's called Bolsa Família, which is for low-income families, and 25 million people are awarded like $100 a month in this program. And this has been going on for 20 years. And if one day some president says, well, we're going to shut it down because it's been running for 20 years and it's supposed just to help these families to grow and stand on their own feet, they're going to get killed. Nobody will approve some kind of measure like this.
And when you said they would get killed, you probably mean literally they would get killed. Or not
really, but they will be instantly impeached because right. the Senate and the Congress wants to be voted. So they want to tell the people, wow, we voted against this guy. We impeached this guy. We want it back. We want to help you. So the best way of getting votes in Brazil is doing a local financial incentive programs. Oh, I'm the government who built this hospital and this school and made this happen. So Brazilians don't understand that government money came from our taxes and from our own work. And not only that, Brazilians think that if you want a corporate, if you want a company, even if it's 5-person or 500-person, you're the devil. You're exploring these people who earn like minimum wage in Brazil is $300, a little bit less, $250. So they think, oh, we're exploiting this guy for $250. That's why you're rich. And he would have a job with or without you. He could do some cooperative stuff, or the government could finance him so he could open his own shop. But there's also another interesting characteristic about Brazil. Over 50% of the population work for a small or medium company, up to 50%. Sorry, up to 50% people working on this company. Mm-hmm. So we're not that dependent on large companies. Maybe our economy could work only with smaller and medium companies, but as you know, government likes to fund big companies, not the small guy. So that I don't think that's going to change, and our economy is getting to a halt.
Right. So very socialist structure, very socialist mindset as well. And I'm guessing now with the lockdowns, like in every country, unemployment is probably soaring. Bars have to close. So how's the government dealing with that?
Well, the government, just like the United States, is getting some incentive programs. Like if you don't fire your employees, I'm going to give you a special credit line and stuff like this. But it's only going to last 2 or 3 months, and we don't know how long the lockdown will take. And besides, our financial situations, especially in the cities, are not going well. In Campo Grande, where I live, for example, for the current month of April, government only has money to pay 60% of the employees. And keep in mind that we have 4 million people who work for the government directly or indirectly. And in some cities, it's like 100% of the population that has a job works for the government. So if the government doesn't send the check, the system collapses. So there's no way other than printing money.
Yeah. Yeah, they gotta pay for their socialism, and now they gotta pay for the unemployment in a new economic downturn. Mm-hmm. And they're doing that. They're gonna do that with the brr money.
Yeah. First, they're gonna sell all the assets they can. As I said, we have Brazilian banks, we have Brazilian energy companies, we have a Brazilian condom factory, any kind of.
The government has a condom factory?
The government has a condom factory, yeah. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yes, it is crazy. It sounds crazy.
We even have a TV channel, government TV channel production with people getting paid $20,000 per month to create content for the government and stuff like this. There are many crazy jobs like this.
That craziness we have here as well, I must say. But not a condom factory. But yeah, we have the sort of Dutch celebrities that are overpaid by the government to be on TV.
Yeah.
Anyways, let's.
The average salary for an analyst or for I don't know, any regular person who works for the government here, it's like 7 times larger than the private industry.
Right. Okay, so what is this gonna look like in the next couple of weeks, months? Do you expect to see a lot of inflation in Brazil?
No, the same thing as the United States. Even if the companies have financing at 0% real rates, and if the banks have money to lend, there's no demand because no one is buying anything. Nobody's changing houses, cars, buying clothes. No one is. People that have money are buying stocks because our stock market collapsed at like 40% and now recovered another 15%. But people who have money are not going to, I'm going to add another plant or another capacity, or Volkswagen is going to build another factory. That's not going to happen because there's not real demand. So I don't think there will be inflation on this first moment if government injects money now. And as I said, we're a socialist country. People believe that's the best solution, and we don't have another way out. Right now, we got to put food on the table for the people, because if they're starved, it's going to be even worse for the country. So I don't think inflation is going to be a problem right now. And another important thing is that government was already starting to perceive Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies not as an enemy, but as a competitor. So what have they done? They said, okay, we're going to start our own instant payment transfer system where any financial startup can give you an account number, and can transact directly with the government 24 hours, 7 days a week. So they don't need access to banks. So if a bank doesn't give access to a fintech, we can grant them directly. So government's starting to realize that people want faster transactions, and they're going to need this now to give this money for the poor guy in order for him to buy groceries at the end of the month.
So that would essentially be central bank money, base money.
Yeah, fiat money. Wallets. Yeah, on a more user-friendly pathway without the need of the banks. The banks are going to be one of the nodes connected to the central bank.
Yes, exactly. Okay, wait, one step back and then we'll get to this proposal, or it's not even a proposal, it sounds. They're actually doing it?
No, it's a proposal. Right. It's under development, but it's going to be done by September.
Right. So hang on, the other thing you mentioned is that you don't expect inflation, but you do expect that the new money will end up in the stock market. It's going to prop up the stock market. It's going to prop up the economy in that sense, right?
Yeah. As I said earlier, I used to work for banks and handle money for institutional investors. And one thing that shocked me was that sometimes those listed companies at our Bovespa, with our stock market, they would get credit lines for government, the cheap ones, like for 100 million reais for 10-year term. They would get this money, and instead of buying equipment or adding more jobs, they'll just put the money in the stock market. It's crazy. So they'll give the money get the money from the government at 2% and invest the money in a bank at 4 or 5%, and that's it. So I think that money is going to go to the economy, but we're not going to see an effect of growth. Yeah, that's not going to happen.
You mentioned earlier in the interview that 50% of Brazilians don't have sewer, and now the stock market is being propped up for, I'm guessing, billions or whatever it is. Is this something Brazilians are starting to notice, or is it just something people don't understand, or what's your impression?
We had in the 80s and the 90s a lot of banks going bankrupt, and the government just handed money and cash to save those banks. It was on the news, on the newspapers, but people just said, well, that's what governments do. They're going to help the big corporates and banks, and there's nothing we can do about it. Basically, the Brazilian gave up long ago trying to change things. That's the truth.
Right, I see. Okay, let's get back to this e-currency. So they're building it. It's going to be base money for, what's the Brazilian currency called?
It's Brazilian real.
Real.
Each Brazilian real now, you can exchange 5 Brazilian reais for $1. It used to be like 3 Brazilian reais for $1 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago.
And this new currency basically would be reals. They would be pegged 1-to-1. They would be.
It's not a new currency. It's just an optional way of flowing the money.
Yeah, I get. Yeah, because it's digital cash.
It's digital cash. But the old cash the old system for now would remain working.
I would assume Brazil is a very cash-based economy, or not?
If you go to a supermarket or a drugstore, 50% of the purchases are made in cash. Yeah.
Right. So what effect do you think this would have, if any? What do you expect of this?
I think some fintechs are doing an interesting job on lending stuff. For example, I can give my car, my automobile, as a insurance for a loan directly with the fintech, and the banks don't offer this service, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So new products are being developed, centralized, of course, using fiat money, of course, but it's better than the older way. If I go to a bank right now and get a loan, I'm going to pay 200% interest rate per year. It's crazy.
Wait, if you get a loan for like a new home or something like that?
No, not for uncollateralized. I just want 10,000 reais to I don't know, to remodel my house.
Right.
I'm going to pay 200% per year. If I'm going to finance a house, so the house is the guarantee for the loan, it's going to be like 12, 14% per year.
Yeah, well, that's still massive, right?
Yeah.
Do Brazilians use Bitcoin a lot? You mentioned the government kind of considers it a competitor. Is Bitcoin a thing in Brazil? Is it big? Is it small?
No, it's small. In August last year, 2019, government made a ruling saying that every exchange or large peer-to-peer transaction should be reported to the IRS. By the end of the month, even if you moved like 0.001 Bitcoin, or if you bought 10 reais, or if you sold 20 reais worth of Bitcoin, the exchange or the OTC should report every single client, every single transaction to the IRS. And they release the data as we change the year. So we have data for the past 4 or 5 months. On average, 300,000 companies or people traded cryptocurrencies per month. So we have a population of 200 million thousand, and we have 300,000 accounts, either corporate accounts or individual accounts trading Bitcoin. So it's
Right.
relatively small.
Less than 1%, right? Or did I miscalculate that?
300,000.
And you said 200 million?
200 million.
So that's more than 1%.
It's 0.1%.
I'm pretty good at math, but not when I have to do it live, when I know I'm being recorded.
It's 0.1%. It's really low. But keep in mind that 60% of the population basically live with government social workers or social programs or benefits, or they live in slums. Like 60% of the population is really, really poor. So maybe they have a cell phone, they have a smartphone, but they don't have any savings. They're only paying debts. All the money any money they receive is just to buy food and stuff like this. They won't be using cryptocurrency anytime soon. I don't think so.
Right. What do you think of what do you expect of the international sort of macroeconomic situation?
Okay, so first of all, we have to understand that these figures, trillions of dollars. The United States debt just went to 26 trillions of dollars. The Fed balance sheet just increased from 4 billion to 6, from 4 trillion to 6 trillion. These figures will never be repaid. There's just no way. So, but on the other side, who holds the treasuries? Who holds the money that ought to be paid? And other countries like England or Europe or China, and large wealth individuals. So just tell the United States, well, we want to get paid part of this cash now, or we won't be accepting dollars because you are printing money. So you used to own us $1 trillion. Now you got to own 10% more because you just printed more money. That's not going to happen because it's not good for any of the parts. It's a shitty situation. Europe and China are held hostage. That's the right word, because they cannot dump their treasuries right now. It's a huge position. Japan and China are the largest U.S. treasury holders. Mm. And the same thing happens for Brazil. Our international reserves are $350 billion. So what happens if the United States prints $2 trillion? We just got diluted. Mm-hmm. We had 1% of the money circulating in the world. Now we have 0.8%. We got diluted. So relatively speaking, Brazil is getting poorer. So for the United States, it's a perfect strategy to just print more money, create more debt, because it's not going to cause inflation in the United States. It's going to cause inflation first in the other countries, right? Because their companies are getting money. They can pay a higher price for items, and Brazil doesn't have this luxury.
Mm-hmm.
If
So
our
what,
government
this,
if our
this,
government prints money, we're going to have inflation on the very next day.
yeah, the United States can export its inflation, basically.
Yeah.
So then why, this may be a beginner question, but I would like to know the answer. Why then are these other countries like Brazil holding so many dollars?
I have no clue. They should be holding, I don't know, real estate in other countries, or a stake in Apple or Amazon or large European companies, but holding fiat money that the other government can and will print when they have necessity will just bring you down. So it's a stupid thing. You should either hold gold or real assets. I don't know, stakes in companies or whatever, but holding treasuries for a mere 1% per year, or now it's even less, it's just plain stupidity.
You mentioned gold. Let's get to gold. How do you think gold is going to act in all of this?
I think gold is the perfect store of value for this first crisis scene that we're watching right now. First, because it have over 5,000 years of history. Second, because it already has a large market cap of $9 trillion. And it's also used by other central banks as a store of value. So if everybody agrees that gold is a good store of value, you should follow. Just like the United States dollar worked for the past 40 years. I don't think that Bitcoin is the perfect solution for the governments right now, because even if they start buying at $7,000, then $10,000, then $20,000, then $100,000, and $200,000, they're only going to be able to buy what? 200,000 Bitcoins? It's not that relevant on a country that has a $350 billion reserves like Brazil. They're going to inflate the asset 50 times, and we only be able to buy 200,000 Bitcoins, 300,000 Bitcoins. So it's not going to be that relevant for them. For example, do you know how much money BlackRock manages, or Fidelity?
I'm betting it's a lot, but I don't know the answer. No.
$4 or $5 trillion each one. $4 or $5 trillion. So if they decide, well, let's buy 10% of our money, $750 billion worth of Bitcoin, it's just not going to happen, because you're going to make the price go higher and higher, and not going to buy large quantities.
Yeah.
So for now, gold makes more sense.
The liquidity is too shallow. I guess that's the way to put it, right? Or not?
Yeah. If you try to buy $20 million, I'm not saying 20 billion, $20 million of Bitcoin, you're going to have problem.
Right. What about for the people then? You just explained the government perspective, and for them gold might be better, but what about you and me and my neighbor and other people around the world?
First of all, people need to understand what money is. Money is something that it's a social convention. Okay, it used to be shells, it used to be salt, it used to be sterlings, pounds, it used to be gold. Now it converged to the US dollar after the agreement that happened. I think that people need to understand that maybe you don't need money after all. Maybe you can buy, you can tokenize lands and buildings and companies, and you can have real assets, real productive assets, and have lesser money. Why do you need to store $1 million in your bank account? Are you going to spend it over the next 2 months? Do you spend so much money like that? Well, probably you need to store money because you didn't have a way to buy a tokenized a part of a land or a building, and now we have the digital system needed for that. So I think that real assets are going to increase in value.
Well, I guess I'll give the counter example. And I think the Austrian argument would be that cash is like a claim on anything. Like you should be able to buy anything with it, and it's a hedge against insecurity into the future. So if you have a piece of a building or a piece of land or a building, or even if it's tokenized, that could still crash in value, while cash would, I guess, presumably hold its value and you can buy anything with it. I think that would be the argument. I'm not as Austrian economics by any means, although I do find it interesting.
I agree with you, but the people who believed that US dollar was cash and held their positions in cash just got diluted 12% because
yes,
the
but
monetary base.
That's because it's a that's where that's why I agree halfway with you. I do agree that money is a social convention, but I don't think I wouldn't extend that argument to say that it can be anything. Strictly speaking, technically it could maybe be anything, but I also think people will be drawn to whatever works best for them, and that's
no, that's for sure. A United States dollar, it works really good for the past 50 years, and probably it's going to work for the next 2 or 3. But sometime, I don't know if it's going to be in 2 years, 6 months, 3 years. This inflation, we increased the monetary base, and we diluted the inflation with other countries, and the economy is in a recession, beginning of a recession. But at some time, this curve is going to flat. We're going to have a higher demand with a higher money, M2 money flowing. So the prices are going to go up. So at that time, people are going to feel that, well, I should have bought land, I should have bought gold, I should have got Bitcoin long ago before the prices went up. So maybe we're going to see depressed gold and Bitcoin and real assets for the next 2 years. I don't know. But as soon as inflation starts kicking in, people are going to really understand that the money that they own in the bank is not worth that much.
Mm. So you mentioned the dollar, and the dollar, of course, is the world reserve currency, or at least more or less. I guess we can call it that, right?
Yeah, 40% of the reserves of the central banks in the world are dollar denominated. So it's still the leader of the pack.
Exactly, which is also then, of course, where a lot of the American empire, American power internationally comes from. I'm not sure if that's the best way to word it. I'm not sure if Americans will like it if I put it that way.
Why do you think the dollar is the main reserve?
Well, you got to buy oil somehow, right? No?
No. The Russians and the Chinese are not using dollars anymore to buy oil.
Well, this would depend where they buy it from, right? If they want to buy it from Saudi Arabia, they definitely have to use dollars. So what's your answer?
Army.
Yeah, well, yes, but what's the army used for?
Invading countries that
don't sell their oil for dollars.
No, not only oil. If Brazil say, well, our exports of coal right now and steel are only going to be yuan denominated, the Chinese currency, or euros. We don't accept dollars anymore. What do you think is going to happen with Brazil over the next month? It's going to get invaded. And we don't have an army to withheld for a single day. The bullets that our army have can only hold 17 minutes of a fight. It's not even an hour. They're going to shoot bullets for 17 minutes, then they're out of ammo.
Yeah, well, we probably wouldn't make it 1 minute, but 17 is pretty good.
17 minutes.
I'm not sure actually how good our army is. That was an assumption, but maybe they're better than
the United States strength. What even Bitcoiners don't get it is the power from the dollar comes from the army. So the day that you have enough mercenaries or whatever that you can fight, you can create your own state and say, well, in this country we're using Bitcoin, but we have an army. We have mercenaries that can defend us from, okay, then United States are not gonna mess with you. But other than that, it doesn't matter if it's rubles, if it's yuan, if it's Brazilian reais. If you don't have an army, you're gonna get invaded.
Okay, then
That's true.
let me ask the question I was trying to get at. Do you think this could shift over the next years? Like, could there be a sort of power shift in that sense?
Yes, because as soon as inflation kicks in, and you pay their salaries and the army and stuff, and you need to buy ammo from other countries as well. And as soon as the other countries and even your army realize that the dollar is not worth that much, they're going to demand more money. And United States will have to keep printing more money to pay higher rates and buying ammo and stuff until the inflation goes to a spiral upwards. And that's when the US dollar would be not longer used as a global reserve. But I don't know how long it's going to take it, but first of all, we need to get out of this deep recession and come to a more normalized situation in order for this to happen.
What would that look like, and how long would that take? How do you think we're going to get out of this in the short term, midterm, long term?
You mean for the dollar to stop being used as a global reserve, or for inflation to kick in?
What I really mean is just the corona crisis. I think we're just at the start. I don't know what your opinion is there. Yeah. And I'm wondering, how do you see the world go on from here in the next months, years, maybe decades, whatever you want to...
So first of all, we need to understand the basic of economics. What causes economic growth? There are only two ways of achieving that. Either you increase productivity, right? Or you employ more labor, build more factories, buy more supplies to produce even more. But for that, you need demand, right? So I don't think that the demand side will increase anytime soon. Not in the next year, not in the next 2 years, not in the next 3 years. So it's not really worth buying more supplies, creating more factories, adding more jobs. What we can do is increase productivity. Technology is helping that. We're seeing that happening with first with Walmart killing out a small business, then Amazon making it more digital and more robotics and stuff like this. But there's also the bad side of doing increase of productivity by automation, which is unemployment. So maybe the UBI, the universal basic income, we're gonna need to test it to see how it goes. But for growth-wise, for GDP, and that will be a good thing, because we're spending less energy to build more stuff, to create more services and more products if we increase productivity. So I think in the end, it's going to be a good thing for the world in general, but a lot of people will be losing their jobs forever. Why do you need, what percentage of the American population work in retail?
I have no idea.
20%. In Brazil, it's like 30% works as a receptionist or a sales guy or replenishing inventories. So that's not a kind of the work that adds to the GDP. It really should be done.
Sorry, I'm not sure I know what you mean. You think it should be Amazonized or?
Yeah, Amazonized. Yeah.
You mentioned universal basic income. Do you think it could work?
I don't know. What I know is that the path the governments are following to print money and wait magically that inflation will never come, that will not work, because we've seen that in Brazil not so long ago, 30 years ago. When I was a kid, we had hyperinflation, inflation of 4,000% per year. We had inflation of 50% in 1 month, just like Venezuela is happening. We used to have it 30 years ago. So I've seen it. The government trying to control, suppress prices and limit the price that you can sell stuff. Then you go to the supermarket and all the shelves are empty. I've lived that. I've seen it with my own eyes. People from Greece seen it. People from Iran seen it. People from Argentina are starting to see it. And that's going to happen in all the countries around the world. So
you think we're going to see that in Europe and North America?
Yeah. If the government start continue to expand the monetary base in this rate, what I think that's definitely going to happen over the next 6 months at least, as soon as the demand starts picking up, we're going to see a huge spike in inflation.
Yeah. So then, how would universal basic income work, or how could it work? Could it work in a Bitcoin world?
I don't think Bitcoin is necessary for the UBI to be tested. What I think that is both the government and the company should be focused not on, today they focus on creating jobs, right? Every government, every president, their number one agenda is we got to create employment. But is that what's the most beneficial for society? No. The most beneficial thing for society is increasing productivity. So the government and the company should laser focus on increasing productivity. And if that's not going to generate jobs, try universal basic income. But your focus should be GDP growth.
It seems like a backward reasoning is what you're saying.
Yeah. But I don't think cryptocurrencies are necessary to that. I think.
Well, I didn't mean to ask if it was necessary. In fact, I asked the opposite. Like, could it work in a Bitcoin world? Wouldn't something like Bitcoin stand in the way of something like universal basic income, if it can work at all?
I don't think it's their conflict, or they will be running in parallel. Bitcoin will be used mostly by countries that are more socialist or more heavy on, like Argentina is limiting US dollar purchases for $200 a month per citizen. So Bitcoin is the perfect solution for those guys. Because instead of working for the government or for a local job for getting paid $50 or $100 per month, you can start working on the internet or do on computer and do the same job getting paid $500 per month. So I think Bitcoin will be used more countries that are already facing high inflation, or these government controls of cash flow.
Right.
Money.
So just to be clear, you don't necessarily think that universal basic income would also lead to high inflation necessarily?
No way. The worst thing that can happen is that, okay, the GDP is growing 10% per year, but our unemployment is 25%. That's going to lead for social uprising, for sure. 25% of the population, we're not going to be crossing arms and saying, well, okay, automation is doing fine, economy is doing fine, S&P just went up 20% this month. It's not going to be like this. So either you share these profits with the entire population, or it's going to grind to a halt again. But the problem is, as I said earlier, the problem is that government are focused on the wrong things. They're focused on not having inflation, having employment, and trying to do social benefits for everyone. That should not be the focus.
Well, I find it interesting to hear you speak about this, because it's I think it's a very controversial topic within the Bitcoin space. Mm-hmm. Universal basic income. I've always been relatively open to the idea, probably, but I guess I'm kind of undecided on it overall.
There's another way you can do for that. Cryptocurrency would be great. You can do micro jobs. So if a citizen reports a car that's parked outside the time or the limits, he could just send a picture with his smartphone to give the ticket and get paid 20% of this ticket fine, for example. So maybe cryptocurrency can work for micro payments, but again, they're not really necessary for this. Government could use their own payment system.
Right. All right. I think we've been chatting for almost an hour now, or not? How long has it been? Something like that, right? Yeah, that's probably about the max I want my podcasts to be. Is there anything you want to shill in a couple of minutes, or something we haven't mentioned yet, which you'd like to mention?
Okay. So first of all, I'm a BTC maximalist. I don't know if this has been said during the interview. Second of all,
your Twitter handle is no shitcoins.
I think. Yeah. Yeah. I've been fooled by Litecoin, by Bitcoin Cash, and even by IOTA, Nano, this other non-blockchain stuff. But after you spend time digging in and doing your own research, you're going to learn that those are just smoke and mirrors to hide the trilemma that I said to you on chat, which is speed, security, and what's the other one? I always forget.
Store value, immutability.
Decentralization. So I think Bitcoin maximalists, most of them are still like, they see decentralization as a god. It shouldn't be. That's not the final place we're aiming to. My word, even for the BTC maxes and even for the other guys who follow other currencies, that decentralization is just, it's not the end goal. We should be reaching for immutability and for staying out of government or corporate reach. There shouldn't be a single entity or a powerful entity like Binance or BitMEX that handle 20% of the transactions or whatever. We shouldn't go back to the Mt. Gox. We've been there, we've gone there. That's not gonna work. So either people start realizing the importance of using VPN, Tor, of doing CoinJoin and stuff like this, or it's not gonna work. It's utopic to think that the solution will come from out of the air. People will simply one day wake up and see the need for privacy and stuff. That's not going to happen. On the other hand, if the governments try to seize your Bitcoin or try to seize your money or try to seize your gold, then they're going to start realizing humans are non-reactive, non-proactive. They don't seek new stuff and stuff like this. Only when they're in jail, they're gonna be looking for alternatives.
Most people.
Yeah, most of them. We're very relaxed. I imagine that people from Netherlands are really relaxed, as the Brazilians are. We always think that things are gonna get better in the future.
And a little bit better at football over here.
Oh yeah. Well,
Marcel, I thought this was very interesting.
We're not even having football games on TV, so I don't think how the population is managing to live without it.
Oh yeah, in Brazil, I guess there's no football either. Yeah, how are people getting by these days? That must be the real tragedy over there.
Yeah.
All right, Marcel, this was very interesting. Thanks for being on.
Aaron, thank you for your time, and anytime you want to chat or just call me.
Cool.
It was really nice meeting you. Thanks for the opportunity.